BWI Daily Edition, taking a look at the Combine today. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Nate Bauer joins me. We're going to talk. We wrote about the exact same thing pretty much today. So, Nate, I wrote it first. You're a copycat. That's what We're going to start the show with an accusation that you copied my homework.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. I mean, listen, it's March 2, and let's just say that there's a couple more weeks before spring practice, so whatever's available gets written about right now. And the Combine is what's available. So let's do it.
Yep. So Penn State has 8 players at the Combine. They've been there since Monday doing evaluations, medical evaluations, meeting with teams, getting their heights and weights and measurements and poked and prodded and woken up in the middle of the night to do testing for, performance enhancers. And it's just, it is a ridiculous week at the Combine for these players. Yep. But the testing, the on-field stuff, the show starts tomorrow. So we'll be covering that at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com throughout the week as far as how players are doing for Penn State and how things are shaping up. What's your thought going into the actual on-field testing coming up tomorrow?
Yeah, so, I mean, to be honest with you, I feel free to correct me. I don't feel 100% on this, but I think it's 95%. Like the lifting, I think, begins today. So, they're moving through the cycle of receivers and quarterbacks, I think, are today, offensive linemen, tight ends tomorrow, and maybe running backs tomorrow, in terms of starting the lifting portion, which is like a big deal for Penn State, right? I mean, these are all of the categories that, yes, you want to impress in the on-field drills, and you want to impress obviously in the 40-yard dash, but the bench press and the vertical, like all of those different things that they use to test athleticism, hand size, like all of that. I mean, obviously hand size is not athleticism, but you want to do well, and Penn State has traditionally done fairly well, starting with the events that begin today.
Yeah. The one thing I'd say is that the bench press is the least relevant of all of the tests when it comes to any position group and truthfully any metric of usable strength in the NFL.
How dare you?
It's fun to watch and it's fun to do in your spare time, but there is no tangible correlative strength index you get from the bench press other than one of two things. You're a freak, and that happens, right? So that then just guys that are strong and that can do these things. Secondarily, especially for offensive linemen, there is an inverse relation to the amount of bench press reps you can do. So if you are doing 40 bench press reps, you probably have short arms, which means you're probably not a good offensive or defensive lineman, because the longer the bench press, the longer you have to push, the more energy you exert. So again, either you're a freak or you have short arms. Either way, the bench press is the thing I look at probably last. That's kind of like just the show-off thing. So
you are ruining the Combine. Thank you.
I'll go into detail about the metrics and the drills that really matter, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But first, I want to start with your article today about Bruce Feldman's Freak List. He updated it for the Combine, and you updated yours for the Combine as well. So when you're going through that information and testing it, it's a great way to set the stage for Penn State's 2 freaks at the Combine who might steal the show. So where do you want to start, Brisker or Brandon Smith?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the notable element, and look, like we're not talking about some revelatory new information here, but the interesting aspect of the update that Feldman gave is that they swapped spots, right? So in the preseason, Brisker was 76, somewhere in the 70s, and Brandon Smith, the linebacker, was in the 30s. And today on the updated list, he's got Brisker at 25.
Yep.
And Brandon Smith at 33. So Brisker, like all things considered, that's a huge jump. That's a huge jump in terms of, and again, like, I mean, it's not like we're talking about him becoming a freak athlete over the last 5 months. It's no, the perception has caught up to what this guy actually is. And so certainly I thought that would make you happy since you've been, pounding the drum, right?
Yeah.
For Jaquan Brisker as to what his potential is, what the ceiling is for him moving forward in the NFL.
Pretty much since the Rutgers game in 2020, when I saw him run from the opposite hash to the sideline and break up a pass. Like, the dude has instincts, he has the speed to get there, and he's going to show all of that at the combine. One of the important numbers that you brought up in your article was the shuttle, the 20-yard shuttle, which is important for explosiveness, acceleration, lateral movement skills. What was the number that you were given that you have a ballpark to set the kind of the scene for what Brisker can do as a... Before we get into the combine weigh-in, I don't have that in front of me if he's weighed in yet, but 200 pounds, 6 foot, 6'1", somewhere in there. What is his projection at that particular drill?
So Feldman actually quoted it at, he wasn't speaking of a source, but he said that he timed at a 4:07 in the shuttle. And what Dwight Galt said actually in August was that his best time at Penn State was a 3:98. So, look, like, you're talking about fractions of a second, which obviously is what we're here to talk about.
Yes,
but
we are. I'm here for every decimal. Absolutely.
Yeah, right. but still, like, either way, it kind of sets the table for, if he puts up that type of a number, how that will be received by NFL teams that are scouting him right now.
So to give you a perspective, John Reed had the best short shuttle in the 2020 draft, and he was a 3.95, I want to say. So anything south of 4 seconds in the shuttle is an elite number. And Brisker's doing that as a safety, if he's able to match that number from Penn State. And if he gets to the number, for that Bruce Feldman is quoting, any of these things around 4 seconds is an elite testing number. And that just goes to paint the picture of Brisker as a freak athlete. When it comes to Brandon Smith, what were you given, or would you read about where the baseline for some of his numbers might be?
So Smith is, from Feldman's article, he's expected to run a 4.4 in the 4.4s, has broad jump 10.5 and vertical 36 inches with a 4.25 shuttle. And again, I mean, I'm just taking from what Dwight Galt said in August. All of Galt's numbers were slightly better than that for Brandon Smith. And the thing about Brandon Smith is, if he's so versatile, right? Like, he excels in all of these different metrics and all of these different events that, regardless of what the perception is of him today, in terms of, I don't know if you saw yesterday, I think, the NFL had his like draft outlook, and it wasn't great, right? Like, I mean, it was among the lower of Penn State's, potential selections in the draft.
Are we talking about his draft position or his eventual production at the next level?
What his draft grade was, right? Like, I think he was graded at like 5.8, and you want to be up in the 6s, like something along those lines.
Right.
But the point was, he might still find himself, after what he does this week, in that, that NFL.com like top performers list. He could very easily, based on what he has done at Penn State, what his numbers have been in the past, still manage to turn some heads based on the fact that he can do all of this at his size and speed, right? Like, I mean, it's that rare combination at 245 pounds to be able to run and be as explosive as he has been.
He will just turn 21 before the draft. That's the other thing about this, is that teams don't know what they're looking for at the linebacker position in the NFL. And I'm pretty confident in saying that, because we see everything from 5'11" Devin Bush, who went in, the Steelers traded up to get Devin Bush, in the first round. And maybe he's 6 foot, maybe he's not, but that safety-like linebacker. We've seen them go from that all the way to a Nick Bolton, I believe it was, from Oklahoma. That's like a pure run stuffer. There is no consensus on how to solve the problem of how you play linebacker at the NFL. There is none. So
Well,
teams, Pete Werner, I wrote this earlier this year about Brandon Smith and going to the draft and decisions and all of those things. Pete Werner from Ohio State did not have a good year per PFF in 2020 when he left. And he was a second-round pick. So it's just about your height, your weight, your measurables. Some team is going to see Brandon Smith. They're going to watch him on the football field. They're going to meet him in person and be impressed by his character and draft him in the second round because he's a freak.
Yeah. And we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know if anybody's going to take him quite that high, but I do think, just based on what you were saying, it's curious to think of Jason Kabinda now. And I understand they play, radically different positions, but
yeah,
he was drafted as a linebacker. He was added to an NFL roster to be a linebacker. And I don't think there's any question he is a fullback now and will remain a fullback. You know? So just about finding the fit and what works for you and what system works for you, in the NFL.
Yeah, and I could see teams, because he's going to be about 240. I could see some team thinking he's a Mike linebacker, which he's never played. I could see some team convincing themselves of he's going to be the next Fred Warner because he's about the same size. Now, the coverage skills are good. They aren't excellent or elite by any measure. So when it comes to his profile, I tend to agree. I wouldn't draft him in the second round, but I'm doing more of a projection of what might be for Brandon Smith. What is realistic for a team that wants those skills? And, 36-inch vertical, running in the 4.4s. I think you mentioned his shuttle time. The one thing I wrote about today with Brandon Smith especially is I picked out a drill for every Penn State player at the Combine over the last 2 days that I think is important for them to show a complete athletic profile. So we know Brandon Smith, explosive and linear. But at that 6'3", he's not the same player as Fred Warner that I just mentioned, because Fred Warner moves well laterally. And he's a good coverage linebacker because he can stop and turn. Brandon Smith struggles to stop and turn. It's the reason he misses tackles in the open field. He is a very tall linebacker. He's got very long legs. He tends to, I don't know if he's overrunning plays or, if he is physically doesn't have the ability to change direction quickly. And I think a really underrated drill at the Combine is the L drill or the 3-cone drill. Now, this gets to be kind of confusing because I say the 3-cone drill and some people think it's the shuttle because there's 3 cones. That's the shuttle. So the 3-cone drill is testing your ability to turn and run and tight corners. I want to see Brandon Smith run somewhere around 7 seconds there because that's a really good time. I think he's going to be a little higher than that. But if he can, then he shows every single skill physically you want in a coverage linebacker to play in more man coverage than what Penn State played, because he was really not put in those situations of covering tight ends one-on-one down the field. Because if he's running a 4.4, that's what you need him to do, is be that man eraser for your problems at the next level.
Is he... I mean, is there like any conversation as to him being out of position? Is there a place where, because that change of direction isn't where it needs to be, that he would be more suited somewhere else?
There's been a lot of conversation about him actually being an edge defender because he's got gargantuan length. He looks skinny for 240. You could see him putting on weight, and he was a good blitzer. But here's the thing, and I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna get a close up here for this. There's a difference between blitzing and pass rushing. They are not the same thing. The skills necessary to beat an offensive tackle with your hands when you are the expected rusher on every play is a different... Ask Jesse Lucetta how easy it is to just transition there. So is he a project at that position? There's a conversation to be had about that, sure. We can have that conversation but I'm not drafting him in the second round and then immediately moving his position. He's not Micah Parsons. So I see his skills as a longer, thinner, rangier player as that coverage player with good blitzing tendencies. I would have to be convinced that he's an edge rusher. I've seen that conversation a bunch of times, and I don't see it right now. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm not using enough imagination, but I just don't see it right away.
I mean, he would have to be very intentional about making that change if that was something that he wanted or that anybody wanted for him, right? I mean, that's not a transition in your body that can happen overnight. It's going to
Yeah.
take some time. So I mean, it would just seem like that if that was the direction that he's going to go at the next level, th- that process needs to start, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Again, ask Jesse Lucetta. He started that
yeah,
at before, after the final game of the season, and then in the
yeah,
bowl game, you could see he was putting on weight to be to
yeah,
260 by the Senior Bowl. And
yeah,
Brandon, this is what I'm trying to say is Brandon Smith is not a naturally strong, like overtly strong.
right.
This all gets confusing, right? Because he's obviously a strong person.
He's
But
fast and he's explosive.
yes. And the difference between him and a guy we compared him to before the season in terms of his strength and what I was trying to say before is that Brandon Smith doesn't have overt power and doesn't know, like, the reason he struggled in the box last season is because he doesn't necessarily know how to take on blocks really well and to shed and to play through contact. Defensive end is only playing through contact.
Yeah.
So it just seemed to me you're making that problem worse by putting him on the line. He is a space player. So then it just becomes, do you believe that there's more room for him to grow as a player as opposed to changing his position? Because he's got to get better at playing linebacker. And I think he can do that. I don't think you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater here.
So that would be an instinct that he lacks, or something that can be taught. Like, is it
Which
a physical part? The being able to shed blocks, being able to take on that contact and work your way through it, is that something that if he spent more time on it, or if he dialed that in, that could be figured out? Or
that's a good question.
Is that something that happens in the weight room? Like, is that something that just he needs to become more powerful to be able to have that trait?
It's I would say it's a little bit of both, but it comes down to disposition, I want to say. He's got all of the skills necessary. He's got all of the abilities to shed blocks. That's why you want long arms. I'll relate it this way. I think it's smart that Penn State is going after defensive ends that are ultra fast at the high school level and playing them at the will linebacker position. Keon Wiley knows how to defeat blocks already. He has had guys leaning on him. He knows how to use his balance and dip and be able to get around those and use his body weight to make them miss without running out of position. Lots of guys that are used to playing in space and that are used to playing with speed tend to look at everything as I need to get around that guy. But again, this is what Ellis Brooks is good at, of dipping under blocks without losing his position in the play. So it's about partly that. It's about, and part of it is, yes, it is just getting used to doing it. It's the technique of how do I attack the proper shoulder? How do I use my arms to disengage? How do I feel those things? You can get better at those things, but it does take time. And that's where you draft Brandon Smith in the second round knowing he's a project and seeing the upside, because there's nothing stopping him from doing it. It's just about learning that process. And he is a bit behind when it comes to that particular skill, but you can get to a level of acceptable and good at that thing and be great at something else, which is what he can be as a chase player in the NFL.
Wasn't one, and forgive me if this is way off base, but I kind of recall one of James Franklin's anecdotes about Brandon Smith being that the conversation with his parents before he got to Penn State was whether he should be a receiver or not.
It doesn't surprise me.
Like that was something that he had played and done well in high school, and that was a realistic option for him. And I don't think he played linebacker in high school. I mean, or maybe he did, but also was more of a safety than a straight linebacker.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and he was a bit before I worked for Blue White Illustrated, so I did not see all of his. I only saw the highlights of him as a high school senior, so I don't necessarily have that background, but it doesn't surprise me. That does not surprise me. Some other guys that are going to be at the combine. I did not get to say my piece about Brisker. But when it comes down to it, is he going to be the guy that blows up the combine, or do you think Brandon Smith is going to be that is the top dog amongst Penn State's freaks in Indianapolis this week?
I think it's Brisker. I mean, I think certainly they both have an opportunity. I don't think that
Yeah.
there's necessarily anything that will stop them from both shine. Look, like there's a bottom line to this of Dwight Galt has trained players who excel at the combine. I
Yeah.
mean, and he talked about it. I was going to bring it up earlier when you were talking about the shuttle drill. They practice that,
All the
A-
time.
and
Yeah.
and not just like hey, here's a couple of tips that you might want to implement to get a little bit better at this. No. It's worked on. It is stressed. They spend more time on it, he said, than literally any other program that they know. And so you're talking about technique in the 40, you're talking about the shuttle drill, the vertical, like all of those tests specific to the combine, they work very, very hard at and take a lot of pride in at Penn State to get them ready to excel at
Yeah.
that. And so I think certainly that there's an opportunity for both of those. I mean, look, more so than the third piece of the equation here in terms of guys who are at the combine who were part of Galt's top 5 last
Mm-hmm.
August. His top 5 last August was Brisker, Brandon Smith, number 2, John Sutherland, number 3, uh, Rasheed Walker, number 4, and Brenton Strange, number 5. And so obviously Sutherland and Strange aren't going to be there, but
Yeah.
Rasheed Walker also has an opportunity to turn some heads,
Yep.
a little bit, just given the fact that he's coming off of a performance this past year that I don't think anybody is going to be awed by.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that there's any question that he was dealing with some stuff injury wise and wasn't able to play at his full potential. But that doesn't change the fact that in terms of a strength speed component, he's in a position where he should be able to have some success. He should be able to do some things this week.
Yeah, the drill I picked out for him, because we talked about this earlier. He's going to run a good 40 time for an offensive lineman, but when it comes
Yep.
to translatable skills, outside of the 10-yard split, which I don't even know for an offensive lineman if the 10-yard split matters, because he has to run the 10-yard split backwards when he's pass setting as a offensive tackle. And maybe you can make the case it's a run blocker, but I still think strength and technique are more important than necessarily 10 yards worth of explosiveness. The short shuttle, though, to pop out of your stance, get out there, and in 10 yards, 5 yards, whatever you want to call it there, to be able to reach block, get out into space, I think that's a really good indicator of explosive athleticism for a lineman, because you can see guys that run man blocking, which, in gap blocking, offensive linemen can be 330 pounds, and they can still be good at the short shuttle, because it's different body types. It's more about your movement laterally and your efficiency through that as much as it is your speed. So for him, I think that number is really important. Somewhere around 4.5 or in the 4.4s is an elite number for an offensive lineman. So if he's 315 and doing that, that's going to be something that shows people, okay, something else was going on with his senior film. We need to go in there and find out what it is.
Right. Is he a left tackle? I can't remember if we've talked about this, but is that
I don't know what to do
where
with
you
him.
have him?
I don't know what to do with him, and I don't know what to do with Tariq Castro-Fields when it comes to projection to the next level. Because I think even Tariq is a good athlete. I could see Tariq, some team saying, okay, this is not just a zone corner. We can play him in man concepts. I was watching, somebody was asking me about why Datsun was the number 3 receiver in this class, or he was going behind the Ohio State guys. So I went back and I watched the Ohio State film. And Tariq did a good job against Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. There were some plays where they beat him, sure, but those are first-round picks. And I don't know what to do with the lack of production and some of the mistakes you see on film. Because I don't know what system he fits in. Because if you're talking about a zone corner, that's usually a guy that's physical, tackles well, and I think Tariq is okay at those things, but he doesn't present to you as a zone corner. So I don't know what to do with him. And I don't know what to do with Rasheed as far as the athleticism is all there, but I would not have him protecting my quarterback at the next level at left tackle. No, I would not. Right. But at 6'5", I could see him playing on the interior. I could see him playing on the right. I just don't know about him. He's one of the few that I don't have a clear picture of what he is.
What about what he does do you think would be the best attribute at another position? Like if he was on the interior, what does he do well that you think could excel at that spot?
Well, he is. It comes back to his athleticism. So if he's, what was he listed at this season for Penn State? 315, 320.
Three, yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think
somewhere
so.
in there. So
I
that
don't think he was up to 330.
no. He would, but he was somewhere around that I would call ideal weight for an offensive lineman. 6'5", he has good pad level, and he has some vicious blocks on tape where he is mauling people. So I could see him
Yep.
being a very good multi-dimensional run blocker as a guard, and he doesn't have to protect in space. He's going to be hyper athletic on the inside and strong on the inside. But is he going to be strong enough to move guys off the ball like Quentin Nelson at the next level? I don't think so. So then, I mean, his profile is left tackle, but I think you do, unless you see something really important there on film and you found out that nugget about Rasheed Walker. I think he has positional flexibility, which is going to help him, but I don't know that it's going to help him be drafted in the first day or two.
Yeah. They actually had him listed at 325. So a little bit heavier than I think either one of us had him at.
Yeah, and again, if he runs at that size and he does all those metrics at that size, then some team is just going to bank on the upside, and there was some disconnect with Penn State because he was going back to his recruiting. He was a top 100 pick or a 100 player in the high school recruiting rankings. So, yeah, I just the underperforming there doesn't make sense to me because he had all the athleticism in the world. It just seemed like things were not clicking. Like he was slower than he was, which I don't understand.
Yeah. 501.40 and a 4.64 or 4.66 shuttle.
Okay.
At Penn State.
So that shuttle actually is a little illuminating. It's not as good as I would expect it, closer to 4.7 than 4.5. That might be some of that lateral movement skill at the tackle position that might not be elite. That might be like, okay, now we have the conversation moving him inside. He's big enough. He's strong enough. But I don't know. I don't know where to put him. I've been wanting to love his film for 3 straight years. And every time I think I see him just dominating people, there's a couple plays where he makes some bad plays from either a technical or position, or he whiffs a little bit. So let's move on to Jahan Datsun because he is the best player I think Penn State is sending to the Combine with the highest reputation. He's not amongst the freaks here that we've talked about. So what do you think is holding him back from that, and do you think it matters for him?
Do I think it matters for him? No, because, and when I say no, I mean not as much maybe as you would think. He's not. I mean, certainly he's faster than he was when he got to Penn State. There's no question about that. And he has film. He has film that people can work with that will demonstrate, hey, he can play the position really, really well. He has elite ball skills. Overwhelmingly, that was the takeaway this past season, and really even the season before. Obviously, 2020 was really good for him as well. But his balls, I mean, it's just undeniable. You can see the catches that he makes, that his ball skills are nuts. I mean, they're just really, really good. And I think that he started to demonstrate this year. We've talked about this before, but the enduring image of his 2019 season was getting caught from behind in that Minnesota game.
Yeah.
And you contrast that with this season, really the game-winning touchdown against Maryland, where he just beat everybody in a foot race.
Yep. The number that we got from him,
competition.
The number that we got from him, as far as the 40 time that keeps being floated out there, is in the 4.3s.
Yep. Don't think so.
I don't see him as a 4.3 receiver, and that is probably on me. That's probably on me being wrong. And that's why, so this kind of leads into what drill I think is important for Jahan is the vertical leap. Because first off, those ball skills and the acrobatics and all those things are awesome. That not that it needs to be verified, but then you go, okay, at 5'11", he's more than just a slot receiver, which is where I think a lot of teams are going to project him at the next level. So that vertical leap, it also shows you the one thing I just haven't seen from him, which is explosiveness, that twitchiness. There's more than one way to be fast in football, and he's very fluid. So it makes it hard to see him kind of turn the gears on and explode. So a vertical leap, a good one, is important to me to see that there is that twitch to back up the 40 time that he's going to put up, which, over 40 yards, I can see him being so efficient and running so well that he gets a really good time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think that this week stands as an opportunity for him, particularly in light of the fact that he missed the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
He kind of bagged out on the Senior Bowl. There was not any, I don't know if you've seen it, but there was never any real explanation given for why he didn't participate in the Senior Bowl after having accepted the invite to that game. So, and unlike some of the other guys, Abuketti and Castro-Fields didn't play in the game, but they did still participate in the week of practice leading into it. Yep. So, no, I mean, nobody's seen him. Nobody's seen Jahan. And so this should be an opportunity for him to put some of those things to action that everybody has seen if you've been paying attention at Penn State. I mean, obviously, anybody who's a Penn State fan is well aware of what his talents are, but I would argue probably that there's still a segment of the broader population that isn't as in tune with what his ceiling actually is.
Yeah, I'm looking up a couple of stats here to make sure I have these correct. 5'11", 183 is what his listed weight is.
Yeah, he's not
at the
physically. He will never blow you away,
and that's ever. So that's going to be the conversation at the bottom of the first round. Treylon Burks is 6'3", 225 and has good film and was obviously featured in the offense in a similar way, actually, to the way Datsun was at Penn State. Similar numbers. One guy's clearly great at football, and the other one is clearly a unicorn. What is a team going to value in the first round? And this is a mistake. I'm saying this is a mistake. Going all the way back to, if we want to include Penn State players, Allen Robinson went in the second round because he wasn't seen as fast enough. And there, I forget the Illinois or Indiana receiver or somebody that went in the bottom of the first round over him in a receiver draft that year that had a lot of guys in the first round. The guy that's good at football is going to be good at football. And Jahan is so good at the position in an era where he can succeed because you're allowed to use space and speed. And I'm just trying to quickly pull up his numbers here. And this is the part that I think is, to me, when I watch his game, I know I've said this a bunch of times here on this show, the lack of broken tackles is a concern. He doesn't need to be Deebo Samuel, but you have to be able to use him in more than one way. So if we go on receiving plays here, I'm pulling this up here quick from PFF. Let's see. Where is he? He is 36th in this draft class for last season in terms of tackles he broke on passes. 9 of them. The top of the class, Sky Moore, who's similarly an elusive receiver, has 26. And it's not like Datsun wasn't used in that situation with bubble screens, catches over the middle, things like that, where he could then go and break tackles. If you get your hands on him, he goes down. And that's the one concern I have. I think he's a first-round pick because he's so good at everything else. But if you don't have that next level, some teams are not going to see you as a number one. Number one receivers go in the first round. That's it.
Yeah. He can't really demonstrate that this week though, right? So in terms of things that he can demonstrate or prove this week, if that's his biggest shortcoming or if that's the biggest question, he probably can't really help himself in that regard.
That's why I targeted specifically the vertical jump, because that shows explosiveness. And if you are explosive, you can break tackles that way. You don't have to run through guys. You don't have to run through a fool's face to go break a tackle and get a first down. You can make people miss with elusiveness and with quickness. And in the short area, that takes a little bit of electricity. And if he shows that he's developed a little more of that and he's, again, continuing to get better as an athlete, that's why I think that's really important, not just from the vertical leap perspective, because contested catches, believe it or not, outside of the highlights, were not great for Jahan either. That was an area where, you go back to the Iowa game, he struggled at times when he had to go up and address the ball in the air with somebody draped all over him. So those are some areas that I think, if he shows an improvement there, can help that solidify that bottom of the first round draft pick, because there's a lot of teams that need a really good receiver, and you can never have too many of them. So I think it's going to help him out in that area. Who do you want to do next? Where do we want to go? Ebiketie?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. Is he is this a week for him to shine? Like, I don't really have a sense of physically.
He's going to shine. I think he's underrated in this conversation he and Jesse Lucetta have a chance to make Penn State stand out at the Combine, as far as just being bananas that all of these guys are playing or are performing so well at the Combine. So when you're looking at defensive ends, you're going to see the 40 time, and that's everyone wants to know the 40 time, right? Being 250 pounds and running a 4.5, it's all the crazy things. Micah Parsons and Odafe Owe running in the 4.3s. With Ebiketie, you're going to want to watch his 10-yard split. That's the first 10 yards of the 40-yard dash. And that's what I was saying earlier, is it's the burst out of the stance, up the field, past the tackle to the quarterback. His bend and agility in the on-field drills is gonna stand out. He's gonna blow that away. He can basically turn and run on the sides of his ankles. He's so good at that. So his 10-yard split, somewhere in the 1.6 area, he's there. I know that it's because I've been watching just Penn State players over the last year. I have not delved into the draft the way I have in the past, but his skills are as good as some of the guys Penn State's put out from a technical standpoint. And his testing is going to be in a similar area of some of the guys that Penn State. He is the best complete package outside of Micah Parsons, who is just a freak hybrid. You put him aside, he's the best. Arnold Ebiketie is the best defensive end Penn State has put out in the last 5 years. So another guy I think could go in the first round. And his testing numbers, that 10-yard split, is going to be really important. And I'll even say, we'll just fold both defensive ends in here. Jesse Lucetta is going to have some crazy-ass numbers. His jumping, his explosiveness, his twitchy, his broad jump is probably going to be awesome. So at 260 pounds, the only question is, does he do all of those things again at 260? So that's, with those two guys, they can, those 10-yard splits, the 4.6 40, I think, is what Lucetta needs to hit. Something similar for Ebiketie. I don't have any question that either of those guys athletically can do that.
I think the story with Jesse that's interesting too is he did have such a strong showing during the Senior Bowl, particularly in the game itself, which again, you don't want to overblow it, but I would guess that if he can parlay that into a strong week here, right, this week, he might be in a different position in terms of his draft slot than where he had been coming out of the season, because I don't think that there's any question that one of the conversations that happened when he announced that he was leaving from Penn State fans certainly was why.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, that was a big part on New Year's Day after he made his announcement after the Outback Bowl. A lot of people thought, oh, well, I guess I get it, but this is really a guy who could use that extra year of seasoning to transition to defensive end. And I think maybe that will not prove to be true, right? That he will be recognized as ready for that role.
Would he have moved to defensive? Here's the question. Would they have moved him full-time to defensive end? Because I've been talking for months with our message board members over at Blue White Illustrated about they need a linebacker, and Jesse Lucetta was a good Mike linebacker against the run, specifically against the run. So maybe he wouldn't have even had a chance to do that. Who knows? Because
he may have saved himself from a system and a spot that wouldn't have been advantageous for what he needs to do at the next level.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say about outside of him, the ecosystem of this draft of what I've been listening to, and honestly, you think about the names that are coming out this year, the edge defender class is really deep. Ebiketie is not going to go in the first round likely because there's going to be a ton of those guys going in the first round that are superstar potential, from Aiden Hutchinson all the way down to the kid from South Carolina that's also really good. There's a lot of guys at that position. Do you think there's a chance that Lucetta could go ahead of Brandon Smith in an upset, that he could be so good this week and he's got better film? And here's why. I ask you this question, and now I'm going to backtrack and I'm going to give you my reason for why.
Yeah, you tell me.
There's a higher floor for Jesse Lucetta because we've seen evidence that he's a phenomenal run stuffer. He is so quick off the line, you can't reach him. He's really hard to push off the spot. He is uniquely strong for a guy that is just learning to play the defensive end position. His hands are so fast. And like I said with the Dafeo way, if you got good hand usage as a run defender, it just is going to be a matter of time before you can translate that to pass rushing, if that's going to be the thing you need to learn how to do. Now, there's other things about pass rushing that are not just hand usage, but I'm banking on Lucetta being able to be good at that. So he's a good run defender. You got this upside at a more valuable position. Do you think that lands him ahead of Brandon Smith if Brandon Smith is good, but the film isn't great, as we've pointed out?
Let's put it this way. Could Jesse Lucetta get into I think that most of what I've seen has been fourth round for him is kind of a consensus. Maybe like as a good, that would be a good draft for him is fourth round. Certainly I could see Brandon Smith falling beneath that.
You think?
Like, I don't know. Now I'm uncertain of myself. I think maybe, given his film this past season, given it's like a double-edged sword, right? Because you're talking about potential, and here's this package that is unmolded into whatever shape it might take, right? And so for some franchises, that's going to be extremely appealing.
Yep.
And then for some others, it might be too rich for my blood, I don't want to get involved in that at this point. So no, I don't know. I mean, he seems like a guy who, and again, I mean, you're much more tuned to the NFL draft, but he seems like a guy who could take a pretty wild swing between what his final right? Like where he gets drafted, versus what the expectations are. So no, I mean, to your question, yes. Sure, I could see Jesse Lucetta going higher.
One of them is an NBA pick, and the other one is a football pick. Brandon Smith is an NBA pick because you only are going to draft guys that are 7 feet tall and have a handle, right? You're going to go after the condor that can fly, and that's Brandon Smith. I think a team that has multiple picks early in the draft is willing to have that boom or bust with Brandon Smith of, if we hit on this guy and we solve our linebacker position, now we don't have to think about it. And there's a couple teams that are going to value his length as well, where he is unique in that aspect of being so long and clogging up passing lanes that way. I have a hard time seeing him fall past the third, just from the physical tools. But I could see Jesse Lucetta working his way into the third. And so now I'm getting to a point where they might both be in that end of day two. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah. No, between Datsun, Ebiketie, Brisker, Smith, and Jesse, you could be talking about 5 picks in the first 2 days for Penn State.
Yeah, I think that's to me that's a reasonable number given what each of their abilities are. Who's left that we haven't discussed yet?
Jordan Stout.
Good. We mentioned him. Can we move
What
on?
kind of bench press numbers do you think he'll have?
Did you read my article? Because that's what I did.
No.
So in my article, what I did is each player, I put their name and then the what they had to excel at, the individual drill. And for Jordan Stout, I put bench press.
Sure.
Because there's no drill that matters for the punter. Like the 40, do the punters do the 40? I don't even know if they do it.
Yeah, I don't think so. The only thing I know about the situation, first of all, it's a rarity to get an invite to the combine as a specialist. Like that doesn't happen very often. He is one of 6 punters, and believe it is 9 or 10 specialists overall, of which 2 are long snappers who I would guess will work out with the linebackers, maybe. I don't know. Maybe. Doesn't
matter. The hang time. So in reality, hang time's important here, right? So you want to see a hang time of like 4 seconds. But when you go to the film and you just want to be able to see it in person, I guess, because he's excellent when it comes to placement, when it comes to distance, not putting it back for touchbacks. If you can get that hang time, that's the last piece of information to clock that each time so that you get that data of, okay, we know he's in this area in these conditions, so he's on our board as a 6th round pick. Because that's the premier position for punters to be drafted.
It seems like an incredible waste of everyone's time right? Because him kicking on air versus the actual act of punting in a game are just so radically different.
Yeah.
But I guess you could say the same thing about quarterbacks. So
yeah. Well, that's why there are certain drills I want to see from certain positions. I don't care about anything the quarterbacks do at the combine. I don't care about anything they do. I want to see offensive linemen, how they move through space. I want to see the defensive ends. I want to see them bend. I want to see if they can go around the hoops. I want to see if they change directions well, they pick their feet up well through the bags. All those things are indicators that they have the athleticism to play the position. Same with linebackers, receivers, whatnot, all that stuff. Certain positions just do not matter. And the quarterback and the punter, they can hang out in the hot tub together for all I care. Anything we of course said we were going to do like a 30-minute show, and it's now 47 minutes in. Is there anything else that you were thinking about when it came to the combine and what you're thinking about this week?
Yeah, well, and to wrap it up, I think that we talked about this earlier, but the question that I have seen the most, or maybe the criticism, it's not really a question. It's a question. It's a comment disguised as a question is, how did Penn State finish 7-6 this season with 8 combine invitees? And I think that that is a simple way of trying to explain a game that is reliant on so much more than just the 8 players who are being mentioned.
Yeah.
Right. And so we talked about it, like one of the 8 is a punter. So
one of the 8 is a punter.
Right. So the punter can help you. That's fine.
Yep.
But I don't know that we would call him a critical component of a team's wins or losses. And then you've got a few guys in Brandon Smith and Rasheed Walker and Tariq Castro-Fields who had what I think most people would describe as I'm not saying good, I'm not saying average, and I'm not saying bad. I'm just saying not excellent.
Disappointing based on their expectations.
Yeah,
the expectations for those guys where they were going to be the leaders and the best players on the team that did not materialize for some of those guys.
You said it.
Yep.
You said it. I can't say it better than that. So no, I mean, it's just the fact that once you kind of take those guys out of the equation or put them in maybe a little bit of a different category as the other 4, well, now it starts to clarify along with the elephant in the room, which is quarterback play.
Yep.
Which
I was going to bring this up. 2 defensive ends. One of them with pass rushing upside, right? So we've got two defenders that are legitimately like the guys that are going to excel at the combine. One safety, one receiver. And the other guys are very talented players that did not play up to their expectations, as we just said. So there's part of your answer, and then you're right. The quarterback isn't at the combine. The quarterback is staying for his 6th year because the NFL was not an option for him this offseason. So if you want to say that these players were not developed as football players, I think this is your day, this is your week to grouse about that because their athleticism is going to be on display. Again, we kind of glossed over Tariq Castro-Fields. I think he's going to have a good day. I think when he tests, he's going to test well. So, yeah, that's it goes back to what you and I always talk about all the time. How much is on the player? How much is on the position coach? And then by proxy, the head coach for the environment they're in when it comes to player development. At a certain point, I think the player needs to have agency and responsibility in these areas. And some people that we talk to say there is no such thing as player responsibility. The coach is supposed to get everything out of them, and if they're not, they don't play. And I think you and I have a certain opinion about that.
So, I mean, sometimes I just look at the numbers, and it's so infrequent. Like the chances of grabbing an interception are right. If that's what separates you, having 6 interceptions in a season versus having 2, so much of that is, yes, it's your ability, but it's also chance. It's also something that can be beyond your control. And so, I'm good for the people who get paid so much money to figure out these things and satisfy hordes of screaming, passionate fans. Better for them than for me.
Unfortunately, you and I haven't done the thing where we just tell them what they want to hear. I have not stooped to that level here on the BWI Daily Edition. I believe they call those hot takes.
Fire everyone.
Yeah. Anyway, that'll do it today for the BWI Daily Edition. Nice casual day with Nate Bauer, who's coming back later this week. We're going to talk about something. Either it's a mailbag or it's max testing day. You good to come back?
No, I'm out of here.
Oh, live on air finding that out. That's good to know. The BWI Daily Edition will be back without Nate Bauer because he is now uninvited from the Daily for the rest of the week. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We'll talk to you then.